Hello and welcome to Going Beyond the Syllabus, conversations inspired by books and powered by experience. I'm your host, Dr. Rohini Abhyankar. This keen-supported podcast explores how ideas from influential books come alive through the lived experiences of engineering educators. Today's episode is inspired by Adam Grant's book, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. The book challenges us to rethink expertise, remain curious, and approach teaching, leadership, and learning with the mindset of a scientist rather than a preacher, prosecutor, or politician. In Think Again, Adam Grant argues that success in a rapidly changing world depends less on what we know and more on our willingness to rethink what we believe. Grant introduces the idea of adopting a scientist mindset, testing assumptions, remaining curious, and updating beliefs based on new evidence. The book explores how individuals and organizations learn, how productive disagreements strengthen decisions, and how educational systems can move beyond fixed best practices towards continuous learning cultures. For engineering educators, Think Again invites us to reconsider how we teach, assess learning, and prepare students for an uncertain and evolving professional world. Our guest today is Dr. DeAnna Leitzke, PhD, PE, Department Chair of Civil and Architectural Engineering and Construction Management at Milwaukee School of Engineering. She serves on the Keen Leadership Council and is deeply committed to helping engineering students develop an entrepreneurial mindset. Her leadership experience spans faculty development, experiential learning, and institutional change initiatives, including leadership during the pandemic. With nearly a decade of industry and over 20 years in higher education, she brings a perspective shaped by experience as an engineer, educator, and academic leader. Dr. Leitzke, welcome to Going Beyond the Syllabus.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
So am I. So your introduction highlights leadership grounded in reflection, adaptability, and entrepreneurial mindset, ideas that resonate deeply with Adam Grant's Think Again. So I'd love to begin with how rethinking shows up in engineering education and leadership. So let's dive in. Engineering education often values certainty and expertise. How do you balance expert authority with intellectual humility as a department chair?
That's a great question, and I appreciate it. When I was looking at the book, there's a quote in the book that really resonated with me about if knowledge is power, knowing what we don't know is wisdom. And I think that when I see the intersection between balancing expert authority with intellectual humility as a department chair, I really lean into that idea that I want to be wise and not that's an important piece of the puzzle. I think that it really is essential to stay humble and keep learning, especially in academia, right? When as a department chair, as the head of a department, anywhere in academia, you're surrounded by individuals with so much knowledge and so much to share. It would be foolish to not tap into that knowledge source and tap into that. So I really think it's hard not to be humble in this environment because it's not being respectful of those that are around you and all of the knowledge that they bring and all of what they share. I think one of the little tricks that I have become very comfortable using as a leader in higher education are pilots. I love the idea of a pilot. It's a way to get individuals to try something new, a group to try something new where it feels a little less scary. It's a little less a commitment, where you really are acting as a scientist, right? Because you're piloting something, you're trying something new, and then let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we won't do it again. But it's one way of making sure that all voices are being heard, and trying something new, instituting a change that sometimes that there's resistance to that in any environment, but it's a way to make it feel a little bit safer, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting perspective. Very suited for a leader. So for me, it's a different perspective. Do you see the patterns that Grant argues about or brings forth are preacher, prosecutor, and politician, right? Mm-hmm. So do you see these patterns showing up in teaching or curriculum design? Or put it another way, what might it look like to approach courses or the pilots that you talked about, like experiments rather than fixed systems?
Yeah. I think part of being an educator, a good educator, is that you care. You care a lot about what you're doing. You care a lot about your students, and it's challenging not to take any critique of what you're doing personally, because there's so much emotion tied to being an educator and wanting to support student learning. It can feel very personal at times. So when you're talking about things like changing a curriculum or getting a critique about what you're doing in the classroom, it's hard as an educator not to take that personally. So I think the first step is separating, trying to make it feel less personal, right? And understand that if someone is giving you a critique or making a suggestion, that idea of being able to separate your ideas and what you're doing from who you are, it's not easy, but it takes intention to do so. And we see it, right, in academia all the time. In department meetings, someone's stuck on, but we've always done that, or right, maybe they took hours to put together one lesson, but it wasn't well received, or it's no longer meeting a student outcome, and things change, and we need to evolve and make sure that we're meeting our students' best interest. I think that's a trick that works really well, that I see happen when there's discourse, when people start to take it personally, right? When you have a group of educators and you're having a discussion, one way to get back to not having that emotional tie is just simply asking the question, what's best for our students, right? Like it's a grounding force in what we all do as educators. And I've seen it work magic in meetings where you're developing new curriculum or changing curriculum or having critique about teaching. It's a grounding statement that can bring everybody together.
That is so true. And you have industry experience and I have industry background, but that is universally true, right? Not to take things personally. That makes work life much, much easier, and setting a bigger goal. Yeah. So when you encourage your faculty to be innovative, so do you think it's risky in a way that it might create instability at all when you encourage innovation?
Yeah, I'm going to admit that that's hard for me. This one is tough for me because I'm one of those people that I'm really comfortable with change. In some ways, I think I thrive with change. I get excited with change. So this is something that I need to be very conscious of as a leader, is to make sure that I am listening and paying attention to everybody and setting a pace of change that is comfortable. Because yes, it can be when innovation is happening too quickly. I think that there is a tendency to for this feeling of unstable or ness, or this feeling of not feeling comfortable or feeling overwhelmed with the maybe the size of the change or the pace of the change. So I think it's important to stay aware of that. And I think it's important that's where it's about really rethinking how you are framing those things. I think that pilot ties in there, right? Sometimes it's easier to say, let's try something once and let's test it out and see how it goes. And if it goes well, we'll continue with it. But, and that's what it should always be, right? But you shouldn't have to call it a pilot. But I think that it's a term that can help get individuals on board with that piece of the puzzle. But yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say that wasn't a challenge for me, to make sure that everybody's comfortable. And I think too, it's leaning into your mission. Right. Again, like being grounded is helps create that stability. So as long as everybody really, you're communicating why we're doing what we're doing, and it's grounded in mission and values, and it's grounded in what is best for our students, right? It's also understanding why we're being asked to rethink something.
Yeah, and when I look back on my years as a student, I have come across professors who were very grounded and rigid in their ways versus professors who are kind of evolving and learning. So do you think experience makes rethinking easier or harder?
I think that what experience brings is the ability for one to see patterns more quickly. So in that regard, I think that it can make rethinking a little bit easier because you see like that the need that we need to, right? You see it sooner that something isn't working or that piece of the puzzle. So I think right, what is another phrase I use all the time is, and somebody told this to me, actually when I started as chair, and I wasn't sure what I thought about it at first, but it makes sense. He said that it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get easier, but you'll get better at it, right? That's the experience piece. And I've used that since with first year students, right? I hate to tell you, but it's really not going to get easier, but you will be better at learning. You will be better at being a student here. You will be, right? You'll get better at it because it's not the first time you're experiencing those things. So I think that the more you are asked to rethink, the more that you iterate, the more experience you have, the better that you're going to get at feeling comfortable, being uncomfortable in that moment.
I love that saying. I'm going to write it down and use it somewhere. It doesn't get easier, but you get better at it. I just love it.
It applies in so many areas of life, right?
It does.
As a parent, as a this, as a that, whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So one of Grant's most provocative ideas in the book is learning to see being wrong as being progressive, or as making progress rather than as failure. And in engineering students, we always train them to minimize error. So how do we help them see that experimentation is part of professional growth?
That's a really good question. And I love that part of the book, right? I love that idea of I'm wrong and reframe it. And that's great. I learned something, right? And being positive about it. But I think we do it just like we teach so many things as educators is through modeling, right? I think that if we approach our teaching as a scientist, right, and bring our students into that discussion that we're going to try something new today. I've never done it this way, but we're going to give it a shot and let's see how it goes, right? And then listening to feedback and making adjustments based on what you're hearing, right? If you approach your craft of teaching as an experiment and you make sure that you're listening to feedback and and that you're making changes based on that feedback, right? That's modeling to your students that it's okay, right? And then being quick to change gears. Hey, it's clear you don't all like think, pair, share. We're not going to do that again, right? Mm-hmm. Let's do something different. Or I didn't give you enough time, or whatever it might be. If we model saying, hey, I made a mistake and I'm going to correct it, that makes our students feel more comfortable doing the same thing.
So over these years, when you have taught or you have been a leader, have you ever had a student or a colleague change your mind in a meaningful way? And what might have made that possible?
It's interesting that you're asking this question right now. I'll admit I kind of had a tough week. And it started with a challenging meeting on Tuesday morning where the timing was really good to be to have this book top of mind for me, because I, after the meeting, realized that I had walked into this particular meeting with the mindset of a preacher. I had my list of all the things that I needed to share to convince everybody else that that this is what we should be doing. And it was, ironically, it was a curriculum discussion and brought a bunch of faculty together to have this discussion. But I was more maybe even a politician, right? I was trying to persuade everybody that I was right. And in hindsight, I was very wrong in that moment. And I actually have a meeting set up next Tuesday where I'm going to be apologizing and sharing that upon reflection and listening to everybody's concerns, that this is not the best course of action, right? Why was I able to see the situation from that lens? I think part of it is the perfect timing of this book being top of mind, and just kind of catching myself in the moment of that. But I also think that I feel lucky that I feel safe with the colleagues that I work with and my team, that I feel comfortable saying, right, I made a mistake. I know that they're not going to chastise me or think less of me because of that. I hope they respect me for that instead, and that I'm modeling that fail fast, that learning from failure. It's very important for us to do that, but it just took me a minute to get out of my head, and I think I was feeling very personally tied to an idea, and it. Right. Self-awareness is a beautiful thing when you realize why you're holding on to something. And I think the important part is owning that and then moving on from it.
Yeah. So am I hearing this correct, that you are saying that feeling safe encourages rethinking to some extent?
100%, because otherwise it's scary, right? I think that feeling, yes. Absolutely. Creating a safe learning environment. So in the classroom, I think that's a huge part of our role as educators, is to help students being able to take learning risks and feel safe doing so. And that doesn't happen overnight, right? You have to create that environment in a classroom. And it's a very important aspect of what we should be thinking about as educators.
Yeah. So if feeling safe encourages it, and if you want to summarize what might be the barriers to rethinking, what could we say? What comes to mind as hindering rethinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when, right, especially so many I think of an incoming first-year student who shows up in an engineering program. Many of them were top of the class in high school. That's how they ended up in these great engineering programs. And now they're one amongst many, right? Sometimes their identity is very much tied to their intelligence and being that A student, being that top student. But you take 30 top students and you put them in a class together and suddenly they can't all be that top student anymore. And so it shakes up their personal identity. I think that in a younger learner is a huge part of what makes rethinking scary for a young engineer who's right, just like the faculty that are tied to what they do, right? Instead of saying I'm a teacher, I teach, right? It's an action that I do. That was a piece that resonated with me as well in the book. And so is it the same, right? We need to help students see that piece too. I think that's in a lot of cases in engineering education, whether it's faculty or students, a lot of us get our identity or self-worth from being smart, by being intelligent, by being the smartest one in the room, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're asking to admit you're wrong and rethink a situation, that can feel really scary and requires a safety net.
Yeah. And rethinking, as you're putting it, it's very personal, right? It's not just intellectual. So let me ask you, if there was a moment in your career when your understanding of what it meant to be a professor fundamentally shifted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's actually a picture of on my wall because there is a very transformational moment for me, and I like to remind myself of it. So there's a photo on the wall. I'm looking at it right now.
I wish we could show it to our listeners.
I know.
This is an audio podcast.
Yeah, I'll describe it. Yeah. So when I started teaching at MSOE, I was relatively young, and I think my confidence it's not what it is now. I'll say that, right? Mm-hmm. Imposter syndrome is a real thing when at certain points in your career. And the way that I thought that I should show up in class was to keep this big wall between me and my students. I'm the professor. You are my students. And it was really more of a confidence thing by anything else. I looked at professors that I had and I tried to mimic what I saw, and I wasn't showing up as my authentic self in those classrooms. I was showing up as Dr. Leitzke, who I thought I should be, right? Or Professor Leitzke of who I thought I should be at that moment. And there was an opportunity. I was teaching a surveying class at the time, and a community organization called the department and they asked for a survey at their location. There was a lake, and they wanted to build a dock that would enable students or individuals, in wheelchairs to get into canoes. And so they needed a survey of the land. And because I was teaching surveying, the call got routed to me. And man, that terrified me. That seemed really, really scary to bring students out there. But it also felt inspirational to me, right? We have the same surveying lab on the same soccer field that I know all the I know what it is, and it's not exciting when we go out there. So I talked to our department chair and I asked if I could do this. And at the time, the rule was you can't make it a requirement, but you can add it as an optional activity. And I did just that. I said, told all my students in this one surveying class, you can come to this 3-hour lab on Thursday afternoon, or you can join me on Saturday. It's a bit of a drive. You need to commit 8 hours to go there. And I was shocked because every single one of my students opted in to heading out to this farm that was 40 minutes from campus and surveying this area. And the picture is us around a total station and all the students just beaming and smiling and laughing. And it was really the first time that I was myself by my students. Because the environment changed and I was in a different area and I didn't really notice it exactly at the time. But I let my guard down and I let them see me, and they learned so much better in this process of the survey that they conducted and the reports that they wrote afterwards, because they were going to they were meaningful, right? It wasn't just a survey of the soccer field yet again. But that part was, I learned that I love project-based experiential learning. I love bringing real world projects into my classroom, that piece of it. But more so than that, I learned that it was okay just to be me, and that I was good enough, right? I showed up and I had no idea what we were going to find, but we were able to navigate it, and I had the technical expertise to do it as well. So that was a moment of, it's hard to teach a class and not know where it's going and not know what the end result is going to be and have those open-ended problems. But I learned that I could do it, and that it was more fun and more effective to just be me, my authentic self as an educator.
Wow, that's not just a beautiful story, it's a very powerful story. I think, it's bringing in so many facets. It brings in being your authentic self. It brings in doing something for the larger good, right? Making connections with the community and student involvement. And I think you should take this story and write a book on it.
Oh,
elaborate it. So when all the students showed up, and you said this was just an option, right? Rather than surveying your regular lab, how did that make you feel?
Inspired, right? That they cared enough, that they really wanted to learn and do something with what they were learning. It was very, very meaningful. And it really did. It helped me. I was never the same in the classroom after that. At that point, I started seeking out as many projects as I could and trying to figure out a way to really bring that relevancy into the classroom, that it was about making the connection between what we're doing with this technical skill of surveying, and that it really is important work and it makes a difference, and it was more meaningful.
That's amazing. Amazing. Any other changes that you made in your classroom after this experience?
Yeah. So I was a new mom when I started teaching, and I had kind of tried not to share, like I didn't let my students know that. And after that, I changed the background, right? I had put, the classic university picture on my background. So when I plugged my PowerPoint in, they would see something professional, and I changed it to a picture of my family and my little guy. And I started telling stories about, as students were walking in, sharing about my day, asking about their day, right? I became a person, right? Like not just a professor. It really did. And I just felt, I don't know, it was a switch that I felt comfortable just showing up and being me.
Awesome. So listening to that story, I also hear a lot of echoes of Keen's entrepreneurial 3 C's, curiosity, connection, and creating value. So where do you see rethinking intersecting with the 3 C's in the engineering curriculum?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I agree. I didn't even really know much about Keen back been, but it's really why I gravitated towards the network, because I found educators like myself that were wanting to teach more than the technical skills in the classroom. I think the intersection between entrepreneurial mindset and the 3Cs and rethinking is that rethinking helps students see themselves not just as problem solvers, right? You hear a lot of it's a common phrase. What do engineers do? They solve problems, but more as value creators. Like that's it, you're not just solving problems to solve problems. You're solving problems to make a difference and create value. And that requires us letting go of old beliefs and, actually putting a light on blind spots and admitting we're wrong, right? I mean, so many times you walk into a situation, you see students do it all the time, right? You pose a problem and there's this initial, I mean, it's not just students, it's everybody. It's, you think you know the problem right away, like before you even investigate it or hear and listen to stakeholders and have, go through the discovery. It's jumping to the conclusion of this is what you need before you actually figure out what, right? So many times when you start down that process, you find out that the problem that you thought isn't the problem. Something else, right? But that's where the entrepreneurial mindset and rethinking, in my mind, intersect.
And creating value, I think, motivates students quite a bit also. I'm reminded of a student from my last semester. We were doing voltaic cells and electrolysis in class, and he came up and shared his hobby, which is he electroplates the doggy tags, and he sells them for a small amount at craft fairs. And so he was so proud of himself. So small projects become big successes, when people realize that, students realize that they're creating value. So that's amazing. So
yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So transitioning back to institutional level. So Grant distinguishes between organizations that continuously learn and those that become trapped in best practices. So where do you see engineering programs today on that spectrum?
Yeah, that's a good question. This chapter in the book really resonated with me. The idea, because it's so prevalent in higher education. You want to put a proposal through. The first thing you do is you determine, what are best practices, and you compare it against, if we want to make a curriculum change, the first thing we do is check to see what all the, what are our competitors doing, what are our aspirational partners doing, right? It's this idea of best practices is kind of ingrained into us in engineering education. So I absolutely loved, and I'm going to absolutely use the idea of better practices, right? Like that's what we should be striving for, is not just because we can constantly evolve. So I think we have a way to go. I don't think we're there yet. As engineering educators, overall, I think that we can continue to grow in this area. Absolutely.
What helps an institution become a true learning organization? Now you're leading organizations, you have led organizations in the past. So what makes that, what facilitates that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's ironic, right? As educators, that sometimes we forget to learn, right? Like we can kind of get stuck in that rut. I think what forces you to do it, I think that things changing around us. I think back to COVID, and it was a situation where we had to become learning organizations to manage that crisis and get through that period of time. Obviously, higher ed is in a really challenging time right now. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for for higher ed to become learning organizations and to really embrace what we teach. I think sometimes we need to be reminded that we need to actually live and walk the talk, so to speak, because we teach it to our students. Right? Our students are supposed to be learning all the time, but sometimes we get kind of stuck in a rut. So I don't think it always happens because for the right reasons, unfortunately. I think sometimes we turn into learning organizations because we need to evolve in order to stay relevant and keep our enrollment numbers, all of those things. But then we should be leaning into that and seeing this challenging time as an opportunity to rethink and get everybody on board with becoming a learning organization and be the best role models we possibly could be for our students. Because, right, when you're the student, that helps you become a better educator. So if we all see ourselves as learners in this process, I think we'll all become better educators ourselves. But yeah, I wish that I could say that I feel like everybody will do it for the right reason, but sometimes you need those external factors to push you into realizing that there are better practices out there.
Yeah. And this is one perspective, the leadership perspective, but there are people who are in the trenches, who are teaching every day to their students. So as I may have mentioned to you earlier, that I invite questions from readers. So I think I'm going to include one of the questions from the trenches. So engineering accreditation requirements and busy schedules and timelines and curriculum and institutional structures can make rethinking feel risky for somebody who's teaching a class, a new instructor, or somebody who has lots of pressures from all over. So how does one balance upholding standards with iterative or continuous innovation?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really good question. I think, though, that we just went through a major curricular change within the department. I do think that there's more flexibility in those right? I look at ABET and the requirements, right? I think sometimes even there we get stuck in a rut of this is a requirement. Like sometimes we use it as an excuse, maybe is what I'm trying to say, is that it might not be as limiting as you think it is if you step back and look at big picture and look at the whole, right? It's so easy to look at just a little piece of the puzzle that I think sometimes we use excuses to not stay innovative and stay current. And that's not a judgmental thing. I think it's a human nature thing, right? Too, because it can feel daunting, and there is, change isn't always easy, but we need to, it's our job, right? It's our job as educators, and we owe it to every student that is sitting in those classrooms to stay current and to rethink and to question whether or not we're doing the right thing, and to listen to their feedback and to continue to evolve, right? It's listening to the feedback of students. It's listening to the feedback from industry professionals who are hiring our students, right? We're not doing this in a bubble, right? The work that we're doing is meaningful work and supporting society. So we need to be listening to all of those stakeholders' needs and incorporating them. I think maybe it's right. Yes, I agree. There's pressure and there's a lot that we all need to do, but you can chunk it out and you can prioritize, and it doesn't all have to, all the changes don't have to happen all at once. Yes. It doesn't have to be all at once, but at least, make sure you're continuing to move forward, and that you are listening and you're making those little steps of progress along the way.
I think this ties into the last podcast that we had, and there we talked about taking little steps, so you don't have to make big changes. So that's absolutely makes sense. So yeah, great. So we are, I think, approaching our time. So I have one last question for you.
Okay.
So what is one belief about engineering education you hope future faculty continues to rethink about?
Yeah. That's a good question. Right? We're in a field that is so dependent on technology, and the technology is changing so quickly. And I think that it's, instead of feeling scared or trying to stay stagnant with it, we need to embrace what is happening, right? I mean, it's hard not to say AI, right? Like we can't be scared of it and pretend it's not there. Higher education is on this cusp. We need to figure out how to be relevant and serve our students and serve society and serve industry and continue to serve with the changes that are inevitably happening. And so I hope that, to me, I want every educator to read this book and think about it. It's so relevant right now, because we need to think about what it means what engineering students need in order to be successful when they graduate and for the next 20 years, right? And that means embracing the technologies that exist and thinking that we need to teach things differently. We need to change our approach. We can't just lean on somebody else to figure out how to keep students from using ChatGPT to write papers from them. That should not be our focus. We need to think about how we integrate all of these amazing tools that are now available to us and to our students that weren't available to our students 20 years ago, to make the process better, to help them learn more, right? If they don't have to learn certain things because it can be done through automation then that's awesome. That means that there's more time and they have capacity to learn about the entrepreneurial mindset or learn about these other things that where they can have even greater impact and create even more value in society.
Thank you, Dr. Leitzke, for sharing not only your leadership insights, but also the personal moments of rethinking that shape meaningful education. And to our listeners, this is Going Beyond the Syllabus, where books inspire conversations and experiences bring ideas to life. I'm Dr. Rohini Abhyankar, inviting you to stay curious, keep reflecting, and keep going beyond the syllabus.